First of all, let's install Magento. So there are three versions of Magento. Magento Open Source, Magento Commerce, and Magento Hosted Cloud. Magento Commerce differs from Magento Open Source in only a few additional modules. And that's it. And yes, Magento Commerce is not free. So if you don't need this additional functionality, you can choose Magento Open Source. At the same time, the main difference between Magento Hosted Cloud and Magento Commerce is hosting. So Magento Cloud is hosted by Magento or the Amazon Web Services stack. So if we don't need Magento hosting or the additional functionality provided by the Magento Commerce version, we can choose Magento Open Source. Actually, all additional Magento Commerce features can be replaced by some third-party modules. So if you have a limited budget for the project, sometimes it's better to choose Magento Open Source with some third-party modules instead of Magento Commerce. Magento uses the following stack of technologies. As a web server, we can use Nginx or Apache, PHP as a language for the backend, and MySQL as a database storage. And that's it. That's enough to run Magento. But Magento also recommends to use the following technologies: RabbitMQ for scheduled tasks instead of cron, Elasticsearch for search instead of MySQL, Varnish as a cache and HTTP reverse proxy, and Redis as a cache storage instead of files. So if we need to install this technology stack, it's better to use Docker. Magento provides two official Docker projects: the Magento Cloud Docker for the Magento Hosted Cloud and Magento 2 DevBox project, which is now in beta. But as I said before, Magento has one of the largest e-commerce communities in the world. So you can find many examples of ready Docker instances for Magento on the internet. We don't need RabbitMQ or Elasticsearch for this course, so we will use only PHP and MySQL. So let's assume that you configured Apache or Nginx with PHP and MySQL on your local machine. You can use any web service stack that is useful to you. It can be XAMPP or LAMP or native PHP, Apache, and MySQL. As I have, it doesn't matter. First of all, we have to download the code of Magento. There are three possible options: download the code from the Magento site, clone the code from the official GitHub repository, or via Composer. Magento recommends using the Composer, so even if you download the code from the Magento site or clone the code from the GitHub repository, you have to run the Composer install command to install all the dependencies. So I think that it's better to use Composer from the beginning of the project. So if we have Composer.json file, we can use Composer update command. If we have Composer.json and Composer log files, we should use Composer install command to keep the versions of modules mentioned in Composer log file. Otherwise, we can use the Composer create project command, which will create Composer.json and Composer log files and load all the necessary dependencies. To use this command, we have to specify Magento Composer repository, but this repository requires access keys. To get access keys, we have to register on magento.com site and get them in my account section. And yes, it's totally free. So let's install Magento. To install Magento, we need to have PHP, MySQL, and some server like Apache or Nginx. You can check all the necessary technologies on official Magento site. As you can see, we can use Windows or Mac OS. Also, we have some minimum requirements for RAM, but It's nothing special here. Also, we need to have a latest stable version of Composer, because we are going to use Composer to install Magento. And you can check possible versions for Apache, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. So as you can see, we can use the latest stable version of Apache or Nginx. So I'm going to use Apache. Also, we should use MySQL only of 5.6 or 5.7 versions. And for PHP, we can use 7.2 or 7.3 versions. So we are going to install Magento 2.3, so these requirements are active for us. So let's check our PHP version. As we can see, we have 7.2 version of PHP, that's okay. Let's check our Apache version. Okay, we have 2.4 version of Apache, that's fine. And let's check our MySQL. So we have 5.6 version of MySQL, and that's enough to install Magento. Also, we need to have Composer, but I assume that's not a problem. Okay, so let's add some domain for our local virtual host. To do this, let's check our etc hosts file. Let's use our local IP address and let's call it magento2.site. So now we can add configuration for our virtual host for Apache. You can find this configuration on official Magento site or over the internet. There is a lot of examples of such configuration. Actually, nothing special for the Magento. As you can see, we don't have some special instructions for Magento. So you can just configure another one virtual host on your local machine, and that would be enough. So we are going to use the following directory, and let's create it. It should be inside sites folder. Let's create training Magento. Let's go inside this folder and let's create some test file, index.php, and let's set some check information. Let's say hello world. Okay, so now we can check our virtual host on our local machine. So we added domain name to etc hosts file. We added configuration for our virtual host to Apache configuration file, and we added index.php file just to check that the PHP works fine. Let's check it. So we are going to use magento2.site domain. Let's check it. Here it is. So now it works. Now we have configured a virtual host on our local machine. So we can install Magento inside this folder. As I said before, we can install Magento in 3 possible options. We can download it from Magento site, we can clone it from the official GitHub repository, and we can use Composer for it. Magento recommends to use Composer, so I'm going to use it too. So let's get this command from Magento site. Let's remove our index.php file. Okay, and let's change install directory name to the current one. Okay, as I said before, Magento repository requires authentications, so we can get credentials from magento.com site. So let's do it. It's totally free, so nothing special here. Let's go to the magento.com site. Let's go to my account. You can register new customer. I have this one. So now we have to open marketplace page. So now we have to go inside my profile, and here you can find access keys. So you can use public key as a username and private key as password. So let's do it. And password. We have to wait a bit. We can store our credentials in our JSON file. Okay, say yes. So we have to wait a bit to download all the necessary modules from Magento repository. It can take a while, it depends on your internet connection. So let's wait. All the files were successfully downloaded, so we can check it. As you can see, we have all the necessary files to install Magento. We can check bin Magento command. Okay, as you can see, we can use some console command for Magento. Actually, we can use setup install command to install Magento via command line. As you can see, we have to add a lot of properties. So probably for the first time, it would be better to use web instead of console command. So let's do it. We downloaded all the necessary files via Composer to our directory, and we configured our virtual host. So now we able to install Magento via storefront. Okay, let's click Ingredient Setup. Let's click Start Readiness Check. If you don't have all the necessary PHP extensions, or you have some permission issue, please fix it before you go on to the next step. After this step, we have to specify credentials to database. So let's create our new database for our project. So let's add new database. Let's call it, for example, Magento 2 training. Okay. Also, we can add some user. Let's add something like Magento 2 training user. Okay. So now we have that database and the user. So let's add this information. Training Magento 2 training. Let's check it and let's use simple path for admin panel, and let's create some admin user test.com. And click install now button. And success. As you can see, we installed Magento, so we can check storefront. Looks fine. And let's check admin panel. So now we have installed Magento, and that's great. Congratulations.